Morning, everybody. How you doing? Welcome back to the Spurs Talk Show. I'm Sean Butler. That's Bugsy Malone. You won't believe what just happened. So we're walking across the road to get to the canal, and I've got her on the lead, and we go through a little forest bit, and a squirrel literally jumps out of the tree and lands a foot in front of Bugsy's face. I always wondered what would happen if Bugsy ever got the chance to catch one. And she just stared at him, or her, and the squirrel just stared back, and they both were frozen in time for about 2 seconds before Bugsy kind of realised what was going on. Luckily I had her on the lead, so nothing could happen, but all of her dreams almost came true in 1 second, and then it passed her by. Poor thing. Anyway, how are you? Welcome back to the Spurs Talk Show. Please do me a favour, guys, smash the like button for me on the video like you always do. Smash the subscribe on the channel if you haven't already. Join the 16,600 and something people that have gone before. Welcome back to them. Welcome to the new. Hit the notification bell and drop a comment. Let me know your thoughts on today's topic. And guys, look, there's not a lot of sort of transfer news to talk about, as you would imagine, given that we've got 3 months now of really one game a week football and not much else to talk about apart from what happens in the news. So what I wanted to do really this morning was kind of pivot to a question about expectations. I see a lot of people right now, a lot of people that I know, people on Twitter that I don't know, people in the media. Even last night after the Arsenal United game, you had some sort of a little bit bantery, a little bit bittery comments from Theo Walcott and Roy Keane and Michael Richards about Tottenham's start to the season. And it just kind of gets me wondering whether or not Tottenham are triggering a few people, or people got a little bit worried about Tottenham's start to the season. You know, Gary Neville and Michael Richards are saying that Tottenham playing really good football. Gary Neville kind of criticised Ange Postecoglou for his approach to the Carabao Cup. Theo Walcott was saying it's all very well starting well against the teams you played against, but wait until you come to a place like this, which of course we will be in 3 weeks' time. He was referring to the Emirates. And Roy Keane sort of doubled in on the digs at Tottenham, saying that whilst he likes Tottenham, he expects them to fall apart in the winter. And look, time will tell. I did take a look at the betting odds on Tottenham and how well they were going to do this morning. I looked, and they are fourth favourites for the league. Man City head and shoulders above everybody else. In fact, the betting market was actually everybody after except Man City. So if you take Man City out and you want to bet on somebody else, who is it? And Arsenal were the favourites for that market. Liverpool were second favourites, only just ahead of Tottenham at 9-1. Chelsea behind them, Manchester United behind them, Brighton behind them, Newcastle behind them, Aston Villa behind them. According to the betting market, Tottenham are now fourth favourites for the league, which would make you think that that's a Champions League space. Now I want to ask you, have you reset your expectations about the season? I think we can all agree in principle that our first 11 at the moment is playing wonderful football. We're getting results, we are scoring goals, even in the absence of Harry Kane, and that we're probably a match for most teams when we can gel. We're also at the start of the journey. A lot of the players are probably thinking that they're going to get better as they become more familiar with the instructions. On the counter, there is the argument that as other teams are going to have more footage to review as the season gets on, other smart managers, smart coaches, smart tacticians will figure out vulnerabilities in the system and try to exploit them. More data, more sample size, more opportunity for us to build strengths and for them to find weaknesses. So it's early days. I don't know whether or not you would consider the opening 5 games of Tottenham season to be the second easiest of all of them, but there is a chart, I'll see if I can put it up, that does reference that according to some people, the people that made the chart, that Tottenham had, I think, the second or the third easier start to the fixtures, which is obviously another variable that you have to bake in. We do have a tough run coming up as we move into November and December. The absence of competitions, of cups, of Europe, does that allow us to stay focused for a larger slice of the season than some of the teams we're competing with, like Brighton, Villa and Newcastle, all of whom are dabbling and dealing with the complexities of European football for the first time in a long time. Chelsea not hitting the ground running, they're going to probably improve. They should be the team that has enough quality to improve, but whether they do or not in time remains to be seen. Arsenal's injury to Thomas Partey, how significant is that going to be? You know, they didn't dominate yesterday. They might have won the game 3-1, possibly edged it, but it certainly wasn't a domination that a lot of people were expecting. Manchester United never do well away from home against the top 6 or top 8. So does that show that Arsenal are there to be gotten at? Manchester City, even without Kevin De Bruyne, I think they're going to win the league by an absolute mile. But everybody else, I feel like there's not a lot between them. And so when you look at Tottenham's squad currently and you bake in the variables that, you know, 1 injury or 2 injuries here or there to key players, key components of the system, and you know the Jenga tower looks pretty weak and vulnerable. But I think you could also make that same argument for pretty much every team apart from Manchester City. Every team, if you lose your top 2 key players, you're going to be a lot weaker. Arsenal will have to find out how they do that. Manchester United last night had to finish the game with Harry Maguire and Johnny Evans on the pitch as centre-backs. How significant those injuries are going to be, how long they're out for, remains to be seen. They do have a couple of weeks to figure it out between the international break and the Premier League restarting. So there's just lots of early variables that we need to bake in here. But the question, I guess, at the start of the show is it right or reasonable for Tottenham fans to reset your expectations? You know, I personally think you're better not. You're better off sticking to your guns, sticking to what you asked of the football club back in June when this transition happened, when this appointment was made. Let's just get playing great football and try and finish. You know, ideal scenario back then for me and for a lot of people I was speaking to was saying Europa League, absolute dream world scenario. Anything above that is completely unreasonable. But more likely a Conference League spot. But to be honest, we'll just take an 8th or a 9th. Anything below the halfway point, anything in the second half of the table probably means it's a disappointing season. But also a cup run would have been nice. To me, the cup run, obviously the first cup run is over at the first hurdle. We've spoken about that ad nauseum. But looking forward now, does that absence of additional fixtures behoove Tottenham? Does it allow Tottenham fans to start to look at the league and think, we can do bits? I personally don't think we should. I think we should be keeping our feet on the floor and recognise that at some point we are going to lose a game in the league, quite possibly against Arsenal. And I just don't want there to be the meltdown that there usually is whenever we lose. We should be expecting several losses this year. Several times we're going to get turned over. And the season has started very brightly. But for me, whilst it's tempting to look at the fixtures coming up, to start to predict how many points we can get, and we did this last night on Savage Show, whilst it's tempting to look ahead and think, you know, I don't really see too many losses between now and November on paper, we shouldn't really be doing that, should we? Or should we? Dare to dream? Dare to do? I don't know. Should we get excited? Should we start to reallocate our expectations? I don't think we should, but I want to hear your thoughts, guys, because on Twitter on TalkSport, on lots of blogs, aggregators. People are starting to talk about Tottenham as Champions League contenders. Some places are even talking about Tottenham as potential title contenders, which I think is madness. But this is what happens. The pendulum swings, always overcompensates, and then eventually comes back. That is life, that's human nature. And I just want to know where you're at. If we were to go and beat Sheffield United handsomely, and that will be the first test of a low block team that comes to our gaff. I think a lot of them will be doing that as the season goes on. So we'll see how we struggle, or we fare, or we succeed against Sheffield United. That to me is a bigger and better litmus test than what happens the week after against Arsenal. How we compete with Sheffield United for me is probably more important than a one-off game against Arsenal, where bragging rights, I think, is the bigger focus. Of course, if you do beat Sheffield United and you go and get a good result against Arsenal with a commanding performance, then I think there'll be peak delusion and people will start talking about what can Tottenham do. But in the back of your mind, you know that you're always only ever 1 or 2 injuries away from Davinson Sanchez, if he hasn't left already, from Eric Dyer, and from a few others, Ollie Skip and Pierre Højbjerg. So, I don't know, guys. I'm excited. I think we're well ahead of schedule, and I love what I'm seeing. And part of me wants to just go full delusion, but I can't. I can't do that in good conscience when all summer I was asking everybody to remain based, remain calm, and remember the expectations that we set then. Because at some point there's going to be an embarrassment that comes along with this season. At some point we are going to get handed one, and I worry about the reaction to that if expectations get reset too soon and too violently upward because of a very, very promising and exciting start. Let me know your thoughts, guys. Like, subscribe and comment, and as always, bye bye.